I know you're part of the Imperial College DMT study. I know Anton, who's a friend of mine, who funded that study, was really interested in this idea of like validating the existence of entities, whether there are some kind of subtle dimension in which entities that are maybe distinct from ourselves on some ultimate level are communicating information to us. And then you have more people like Andres from Andres Emilson, is that his name, from Qualia?
Yeah.
Who basically thinks that the different DMT states are correlated to these different kind of like geometries, right? Like, and then ultimately it's not about an other, it's just about these the different ways that your kind of neurological landscape gets kind of reconfigured as you go deeper, which gives both different physical experiences of a spatial inner reality, and even a temporal experience also shifts. Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what do you think is happening right now around this whole psychedelic movement and what it's kind of suggesting and revealing for the future of consciousness?
Yeah, look, I was on the DMT extended state study, which I share some of the experiences in my book, so I won't go into them in detail. But I was really curious about, can we go into the DMT realm, staying there for 40 minutes, multiple trips in, and come back with useful information? And in a sense, yes, but also the main message I got was like, we have to sort our own shit out before getting information from aliens or entities, whatever they may be, right? So while I think it's very interesting philosophically to explore DMT entities and the nature of them, and I celebrate it, and I'm, always fascinated by it and have my own thoughts on it, my own personal interest is moved much more to the practical, which is the theme of my book, how can psychedelic consciousness actually change the systems we live in? And the place I'm putting my energy right now is in psychedelic assisted innovation and problem solving, because a couple of reasons. One is that I've always been skeptical of the medicalization of psychedelics. Of all the things psychedelics do, curing mental health ailments is a really important one and absolutely vital, and people should have that access. But for me, what's interested in me the most, and I think the psychedelic underground that I came up in, of which, Daniel, you were a part with Reality Sandwich and all those endeavors and Breaking Up in the Head, there was much more of an excitement that we had around significant cultural shift, right? Consciousness evolution, what it actually means to imagine a new future. And so much of the bandwidth has been taken up by medicalization over the last few years that it's been hard to get that message across. And the mainstream understanding of psychedelics has become mental health treatments. And while they are that's not all they are. In fact, it's not even most of what they are. And so the recent FDA ruling, which was a setback for MAPS and Lycos,
Maybe just
I'd like to explain that. Yeah, so MAPS is a multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies, which has been working for about 35 years to get MDMA legalized as a medicine. It's run by Rick Doblin. To cut a long story short, there were some activists, a group called Symposia, which had a pretty big impact on the FDA deciding right at the last stage where MDMA would have been made legal as a treatment for PTSD. They decided not to. So there's a lot of complexity to it. Symposia are not good faith actors. They had some good points in their critique, but massively overblown, which is usually their modus operandi. But what it has meant is that there's a kind of pause in the psychedelic space and a kind of taking stock, and there's certain like hype bubble has been burst. And that's not a bad thing in a sense, because we will get to psychedelic assisted mental health treatments. There's a lot of other avenues that's happening in. I would have much preferred if MAPS had gotten there in this way, but what it has also opened up is the conversation around funders and donors around, well, maybe medicalization isn't the only route. And so this organization I mentioned, Minds, that I'm involved with, that Bruce Damer set up, is set up, I mean, just a brief, if you haven't heard of Bruce Damer before. His story is wild. He was studying the origins of life. He's a very accomplished scientist, was not outwardly psychedelic, like he didn't talk about his psychedelic use. He had an ayahuasca trip where he got an insight into the chemistry they were stuck on. It was believed until basically this paper that the origins of life came from underwater vents, like hot volcanic underwater vents. Bruce Damer and the team that he's working with, I think at UC Santa Cruz, I could be wrong about that, they were in the minority saying, no, actually, we think Darwin was right. Life began in warm pools, sort of like hot springs. And so in his ayahuasca journey, Bruce became these proto cells, so these polymers, and he was being like torn as the spring filled up and in and out of water. He was like being torn apart, basically. And then he realized that it was the death and rebirth, effectively, of these proto cells that was creating these complex systems that eventually became polymers and proteins, and then eventually life. But life began as this kind of, as he said, like there was no individuals. There was just a collective spawning of life, right? So he has this trip, and then he has a breathwork session a few weeks later, and he calls up the lab, and he sketches it all out, the chemistry, and then he calls the lab and he describes it, and they're like, yep, you've cracked it. That's it. That's the piece we were missing. Then that becomes a paper. That paper gets on the cover of Scientific American, and completely has destroyed the other theory. And what the crazy thing, which I didn't realize until I saw the presentation he gave this weekend, is that they went to, in fact, the famous hot springs that are on the land Burning Man is on, in near Gerlach. This kind of, you might have seen them, there's these hot springs. They did these special microscopic readings of the water, and then when the lab sent back the imagery, they had like the first imagery of these like proto cells, right? That were very much what he experienced and became in his trip. So you go from psychedelic experience, which, by the way, didn't just come to him willy-nilly. He was already studying the field. That's a really important thing, right? Didn't just kind of download to anyone. Then into science, into proof of it, upends the field. And because he works with NASA, it's changed where the Mars rovers are going. So in the next few months, so they've changed where they're looking for life on Mars because of this psychedelic trip, right? So that story is not the only story of psychedelic assisted, insights and innovation. There's also Kary Mullis, with the PCR, polymerase chain reaction. He said that wouldn't have come about without LSD. Maybe Francis Crick, but it's kind of controversial, who discovered the DNA double helix. He said, I wasn't on LSD, don't publish that, I'll kill you, kind of thing. And then after he died, someone did publish it. So it's really like no one really knows. So there's all these examples through history. And so I'm very interested in, okay, how do we use psychedelics to solve real world problems, like developing a more efficient solar panel, or a new type of education system, or whatever it may be. So that's where, and so Minds calls that the fourth wave of psychedelics. And I think it may be, because there's a lot of we need new ideas. Like Terence McKenna said, we need medium-sized ideas to save ourselves. And I think if we can develop protocols that do that effectively, and you can get lots of different experts in from different fields, regardless of what they are, and there's a 5-day process or whatever it might be that reliably gives people insights. You can't guarantee they're going to have world-changing insights, but at least reliably gets them further in their problem than they were. Then that's where I really see, like, that's how psychedelics can change the world in a very practical way.